Jake Morrison floated near the window of the space station, watching Earth spin slowly below him. He had been living up here for 6 months now, and the view never got old. The blue planet looked so peaceful from up here. White clouds moved across, the oceans like slow rivers. He could see the lights of cities on the dark side of the world. Jake was drinking his morning coffee when something felt wrong. The coffee bag started floating away from his hand. That was normal in space. But something else was different. The sunlight coming through the window was getting dimmer. He pressed his face against the thick glass and looked around. The sun should be bright and clear, but it was not. Something was blocking the light. Something very big. Jake grabbed his radio and called down to Earth. "Control, this is Morrison on the station. We have a problem up here. Something is blocking the sun." The voice from Earth sounded worried. "Jake, we see it too. Our satellites are picking up massive objects. They are coming from behind the moon." Jake pushed himself to the other side of the station to get a better look. What he saw made his heart stop. Huge black shapes were moving out from behind the moon. They were ships, but they were bigger than anything he had ever seen. Each one was the size of a small country. The ships were dark and smooth, like black glass. They seemed to eat the light around them. As they moved closer to Earth, Jake could see there were 7 of them. They moved in perfect order, like they were dancing. Down on Earth, Dr. Amy Carter was working late at her office when all the computers started beeping at once. She worked for the space agency, trying to find signals from other worlds. Tonight, she was finding more signals than she ever wanted. Her screen filled with numbers and patterns. The signals were coming from the direction of the moon, but they were not like anything in her database. They were too organized, too perfect. Someone was talking out there, and it was not human. Amy called her boss right away. "Sir, you need to see this. We are getting signals from space. Multiple sources. They are talking to each other." At the same time, deep inside a mountain in Colorado, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker was having the worst day of his career. Every screen in the command center was flashing red. Satellites were reporting objects in space that should not be there. Steve had spent 20 years in the military, but nothing had prepared him for this. The objects were so big that they were affecting Earth's gravity. The ocean tides were going crazy. Weather stations around the world were reporting strange storms. "Sir, the objects are taking positions around Earth," reported one of his staff. "They are forming a circle around the planet." Steve looked at the main screen. 7 dots were moving into position around Earth. They were spacing themselves perfectly like points on a star. Whatever these things were, they knew exactly what they were doing. Back on the space station, Jake watched the alien ships take their positions. Each ship was different, but they all had the same dark crystal look. They were beautiful in a scary way, like looking at a storm cloud that might destroy everything. The ship stopped moving when they formed a perfect circle around Earth. They just hung there in space, waiting. Jake could feel the station shaking slightly from their gravity. These things were so massive that they were pulling on everything around them. Jake called Earth again. "Control, I can see all 7 ships now. They are just sitting there. What do you want me to do?" "Stay calm, Jake. Do not do anything. Just watch and report." Around the world, people were starting to notice that something was wrong. The day was darker than it should be. The moon looked strange. Scientists were on every news channel, trying to explain what was happening. Some people panicked. Others stood in the streets looking up at the sky. Children pointed at the dark shapes that were barely visible during the day but glowed faintly at night. Dr. Amy Carter worked through the night, trying to understand the alien signals. The patterns were complex but somehow familiar. It was like looking at a language that was almost English but not quite. She could tell they were talking, but she could not understand what they were saying. The signals were not coming to Earth. The ships were talking to each other. It was like listening to a conversation between giants who had not noticed the small people below them. Steve Parker coordinated with military leaders around the world. Every country was asking the same questions. Were these ships friendly? Were they here to attack? Why were they just sitting there? "We need to be ready for anything," Steve told his team. But we also need to be smart. If these things wanted to hurt us, they probably would have done it already. As the hours passed, the ships did nothing. They just waited. Scientists measured them and found that each one was hundreds of miles long. They were made of materials that Earth science could not identify. They seemed to bend light around them, which is why they looked so dark. Jake spent his time taking pictures and measurements from the space station. He was probably the closest human to the alien ships, and that thought both excited and terrified him. He could see details on their surfaces that no one on Earth could see. Strange patterns that looked like writing or maybe circuits. Then something changed. One of the ships, the largest one, started to glow brighter. A small piece broke away from it and started moving toward Earth. It was tiny compared to the mother ship, but it was still bigger than any spacecraft humans had ever built. Jake watched the small ship descend toward Earth's atmosphere. His radio crackled with voices from around the world. Everyone was asking the same question. What did the aliens want? The small ship entered Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, but it did not burn up. It slowed down and started flying like an airplane. People around the world watched on television as the alien craft looked for a place to land. The ship chose a flat area in the desert, far from any cities. It landed gently, like a bird settling on water. Then it just sat there, waiting. Dr. Amy Carter packed her equipment and headed for the landing site. Steve Parker coordinated military units to surround the area, but not too close. Jake Morrison watched from space as humanity prepared for its first meeting with beings from another world. The alien fleet continued to wait in perfect formation around Earth. 7 massive ships, each one carrying unknown technology and unknown intentions. They had traveled across the galaxy to reach Earth, and now they were here. But what did they want? And why had they chosen this moment to reveal themselves? The answers would change humanity forever. The alien ship sat in the Nevada desert like a dark jewel. It was about the size of a passenger airplane, but it looked nothing like any human machine. The surface was smooth and black, made of the same crystal material as the giant ships in space. Strange lights moved under the surface like slow lightning. Captain Lisa Hayes arrived at the site with her team of language experts. She had studied alien communication theory for years, but she never thought she would need to use it. Now she stood 50 feet away from a real alien spacecraft, and her hands were shaking. Dr. Amy Carter pulled up in a military truck, her equipment bouncing in the back. She had been awake for 36 hours, living on coffee and excitement. The signals from space were getting stronger, and she was starting to understand patterns in the alien language. "Any movement from the ship?" Amy asked as she set up her computers. "Nothing yet," Lisa replied. "It just sits there. No doors, no windows that we can see. But it is definitely active. Our instruments show it is using some kind of energy." Steve Parker coordinated the operation from a command trailer parked a safe distance away. Military units surrounded the area, but they kept their weapons lowered. Everyone knew that if the aliens wanted to hurt them, human weapons would probably not help much. Around the world, people watched on television as scientists and soldiers waited near the alien craft. News reporters talked constantly, but no one really knew what to expect. Some religious leaders said it was the end of the world. Others said it was the beginning of a new age. On the space station, Jake Morrison kept watching the 7 giant ships. They had not moved since taking their positions around Earth. They just waited, like patient guardians. Sometimes he thought he could see lights moving inside them, but he could not be sure. Then something happened. The small ship in the desert started to glow. The lights under its surface moved faster, creating patterns that hurt to look at. The air around the ship began to shimmer like heat waves. "Everyone back," Steve shouted over the radio. "Something is happening." But instead of opening doors or extending ramps, the ship did something no one expected. It started projecting images into the air above it. 3-dimensional pictures appeared, floating in space like solid objects. The first image showed Earth from space exactly as it looked right now with the 7 alien ships around it. Then the image changed to show other planets, other worlds. Some were green and blue like Earth, others were red and dead. A few were covered in ice. Lisa grabbed her radio. "The ship is trying to communicate. It is showing us pictures." Amy worked frantically at her computer, recording everything. The images were changing every few seconds, showing different scenes. Solar systems with multiple suns, creatures that looked almost human, cities that stretched across entire continents. Then words appeared in the air, real words in English and dozens of other human languages. The letters were made of light, floating like ghosts in the desert air. "We are the Corvani Empire," the words said. "We have watched your species for many cycles. You have reached the stars. Now you must be judged." Steve felt his blood turn cold. Judged? That did not sound friendly. More words appeared. "We are the guardians of this galaxy sector. When a species learns to travel between worlds, we must decide if they are safe to continue existing." Amy's fingers flew over her keyboard, saving every word. This was the most important conversation in human history, and she was not going to miss a single detail. "We have evaluated 847 species," the message continued. 23 were found worthy of continued existence. The others were recycled for the good of all life. Lisa felt sick. Recycled. That was a polite way of saying killed. The holographic display showed images of dead worlds. Planets stripped of all life, their surfaces scarred and empty. Then it showed thriving worlds with beautiful cities and happy people. The message was clear: cooperate or die. "Your species shows promise," the alien words continued. "But you also show dangerous traits. You fight among yourselves. You damage your world. You create weapons of great destruction. These are concerning behaviors." Jake watched from space as news of the alien message spread around the world. He could see cities lighting up as people stayed awake to hear the news. Some places were celebrating. Others were rioting. The alien message was not finished. "We will give you one chance to prove your worth. We have a problem that has challenged us for 10,000 of your years. If you can solve it, your species will be allowed to continue. If you fail, your world will be recycled." Amy stopped typing. A test? What kind of test could stump an alien civilization for 10,000 years? The holographic display changed again. Now it showed complex mathematical equations floating in the air, numbers and symbols that made no sense to human eyes. But there was something familiar about the patterns, something that reminded Amy of her work with consciousness and artificial intelligence. "This equation describes the relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics," the message explained. "We have tried to solve it for millennia. Our greatest minds have failed. We need this solution to create true artificial consciousness." Lisa stared at the floating equations. "They want us to solve a math problem that they cannot solve? How is that possible?" "We will give you 7 of your days," the alien message continued. "Gather your best minds, work together, find the solution we cannot find. Success brings acceptance into our galactic community. Failure brings extinction." The equations disappeared and new images appeared. These showed the Corvani themselves for the first time. They were tall and thin, with smooth gray skin and large, black eyes. They moved with perfect coordination like parts of a single machine. "We do not understand individual consciousness as you do," the message said. "We think as one mind. Perhaps this is why we cannot solve the equation. Perhaps your chaotic way of thinking holds the answer." Steve coordinated with military leaders around the world. 7 days to save humanity. 7 days to solve a problem that had stumped the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Amy studied the recordings of the alien equations. There was something about them that did not seem right. They were too complex, too focused on mathematics. Real consciousness was not just about numbers and logic. Lisa worked with translation teams to make sure they understood every word of the alien message correctly. There could be no mistakes when the survival of humanity was at stake. The alien ship's glow faded, and the desert became quiet again. But around the world, the greatest minds in science were already working. Physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists, and philosophers all focused on the same goal: solving the puzzle that would save humanity. Jake looked down at Earth from his space station. The planet looked the same as always, but everything had changed. Humanity now knew they were not alone in the universe. They also knew that their new neighbors were judges who had destroyed hundreds of worlds. 7 days to prove that humanity deserved to live. 7 days to solve the impossible. The clock was ticking, and the fate of every person on Earth hung in the balance. The alien fleet waited in perfect silence around the planet, patient as death itself. Dr. Pete Morgan had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were red and his hands shook as he drank his 10th cup of coffee. Around him, the research facility in Colorado buzzed with activity. Scientists from every country had come here to work on the alien equation. Pete stared at the complex mathematical formulas on his computer screen. As a quantum physicist, he understood parts of the equation, but other sections made no sense at all. The aliens were trying to describe consciousness, using pure mathematics, and something about that felt wrong. Across the room, Dr. Nina Ross worked at her own computer. She studied how the human brain worked, especially how people became aware of themselves. She had spent years trying to understand consciousness, but she had never thought about it as a math problem. "This is impossible," Pete said, rubbing his tired eyes. "They want us to solve something in 7 days that they could not solve in 10,000 years. How are we supposed to be smarter than them?" Nina looked up from her screen. "Maybe we are not supposed to be smarter. Maybe we are supposed to be different." At another workstation, Alex Kim typed code at incredible speed. He had built some of the most advanced artificial intelligence programs on Earth. But even his best computers could not make sense of the alien equation. The math was too complex, too perfect. "I keep thinking we are missing something obvious," Alex said. "The aliens said they think as one mind. What if that is the problem?" Outside the research facility, Marine Colonel Dan Price coordinated security. Military units surrounded the building, ready for anything. Dan had fought in wars around the world, but this was different. This time he was protecting the people who might save humanity. Dan watched the news reports on his tablet. Around the world, people were reacting in different ways to the alien ultimatum. Some were praying. Some were partying, thinking the world would end anyway. Others were working together, trying to help solve the problem. Back inside the facility, Dr. Amy Carter sat in a corner with headphones on, listening to recordings of the alien signals. She had been studying their language patterns since the ships arrived, and she was starting to understand how the Corvani thought. "They are so logical," Amy said to herself. "Every word, every signal follows perfect patterns. They never make mistakes. They never contradict themselves. They are like living computers." That gave her an idea. She walked over to Nina's workstation. "What if the problem is not the equation itself?" Amy asked. "What if the problem is how they think about consciousness?" Nina stopped typing and looked at Amy. "What do you mean?" "The Corvani think in pure logic. They never doubt themselves, they never make mistakes. But human consciousness is full of contradictions. We doubt ourselves all the time. We make irrational choices. We dream impossible dreams." Pete overheard their conversation and joined them. "You think consciousness requires the ability to be wrong?" "Not just wrong," Nina said, getting excited. "Think about what makes us human. We feel emotions that do not make logical sense. We believe in things we cannot prove. We make art for no practical reason. We fall in love with people who are bad for us." Alex stopped coding and listened. These ideas were completely different from how he programmed artificial intelligence. He always tried to make his programs logical and efficient. He never tried to make them irrational. "So you are saying consciousness is not a math problem?" Alex asked. "Maybe it is a math problem that can only be solved by beings who are bad at math," Nina replied with a small laugh. Meanwhile, in a small town in Texas, 16-year-old Maya Johnson sat in her bedroom working on the alien equation. She was a genius who had graduated from high school at 14 and was now studying advanced mathematics in college. But unlike the adult scientists, Maya approached the problem like a puzzle game. Maya had printed out the alien equations and covered her walls with them. She drew lines connecting different parts, added her own notes, and tried to see patterns that others might miss. Her room looked like the workspace of a mad scientist, but Maya had an advantage that the other scientists did not have. She was still young enough to think in ways that adults had forgotten. She did not worry about being wrong or looking foolish. She just played with the ideas. What if the aliens are asking the wrong question? Maya said to her computer. She often talked to herself when thinking through difficult problems. She looked at the equations again, but this time she ignored the complex mathematics. Instead, she focused on what the aliens said they wanted, artificial consciousness that was truly alive. Maya grabbed a marker and wrote on her wall, "What makes something alive?" She thought about her pet cat, Whiskers. Whiskers was definitely alive and conscious, but he was not very good at mathematics. He made bad decisions all the time, like trying to catch birds through windows. But those bad decisions were part of what made him real. Back at the research facility, the team was having a breakthrough. They had stopped trying to solve the alien equation using traditional mathematics. Instead, they were thinking about consciousness as something that could not be calculated. What if we told the aliens that their equation is impossible to solve? Pete suggested. That is not helpful, Alex replied. They will just kill us for failing. No, wait, Nina said. What if we tell them the equation is impossible to solve because consciousness is not supposed to be perfect? What if we show them that real consciousness requires imperfection? Amy was recording everything, thinking about how to explain this idea to beings who thought in pure logic. How do you tell someone that the answer to their question is that there is no answer? Colonel Dan Price received a call on his radio. It was from Maya Johnson in Texas. The teenager had been working alone and had come up with her own solution to the problem. Let me talk to the scientists, Maya said over the radio. I think I know what the aliens are doing wrong. Dan patched Maya through to the research team. Her young voice filled the room through the speakers. The aliens want to create artificial consciousness, right? Maya said. But they are trying to make it perfect. Real consciousness is not perfect. It doubts itself. It makes mistakes. It feels sad sometimes for no reason. The adult scientists looked at each other. This 16-year-old girl was saying the same thing they had just figured out. So what do we tell them? Pete asked. Maya's answer was simple. We tell them that consciousness is not a math problem. It is a feeling problem. You cannot calculate feelings. You can only experience them. And to experience them, you have to be willing to be wrong sometimes. Nina smiled for the first time in days. We tell them that their equation cannot be solved, because consciousness is not an equation. It is a paradox. It is the ability to know you might be wrong but believe in something anyway. The team worked through the night, preparing their answer for the aliens. They were not giving the Corvani a mathematical solution. They were giving them a philosophical one. They were telling the most logical beings in the galaxy that logic alone could not create life. As dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, the human team prepared to contact the alien ship. They had spent 4 days working on the problem, and now they had an answer that no one expected. They were going to tell the aliens that the secret to consciousness was learning how to be beautifully, chaotically, perfectly imperfect. The alien ship in the Nevada desert began to glow again. Dr. Pete Morgan, Dr. Nina Ross, Alex Kim, and Maya Johnson stood nearby with their team, ready to present their answer to the Corvani. They had spent 4 days thinking about consciousness in ways they never had before. Captain Lisa Hayes held the radio that would transmit their message to the alien ship. Her hands were steady, but her heart was beating fast. The fate of humanity depended on whether the aliens would accept their unusual answer. Begin transmission, Steve Parker ordered from the command center. Nina stepped forward and spoke clearly into the radio. Corvani Empire, we have studied your equation. We believe we understand why you cannot solve it. The alien ship's glow grew brighter. Somewhere in space, beings with technology beyond human imagination were listening to their words. Your equation tries to create perfect consciousness, Nina continued. But perfect consciousness cannot exist. Real consciousness requires the ability to doubt, to make mistakes, to feel emotions that are not logical. Pete took the radio next. You think as one mind with perfect logic, but individual consciousness is messy and chaotic. It must be able to contradict itself and still function. Inside the alien ship, the Corvani were confused. For 10,000 years, they had tried to create artificial consciousness by making it more logical, more perfect. The humans were suggesting the opposite approach. The alien ship projected new words into the air. Explain this paradox. How can consciousness function if it is imperfect? Maya stepped forward. At 16, she was the youngest person ever to speak directly to an alien civilization. But she was not nervous, she was excited. Think about dreams, Maya said. When you sleep, your brain creates impossible worlds. You might dream you are flying or that you are someone else entirely. Dreams are completely illogical, but they are part of consciousness. Alex added his thoughts. I have been building artificial intelligence for years. Every time I make my programs more logical, they become less human-like. The most human-like AI I ever created was one that could doubt its own answers. The Corvani ship was quiet for several minutes. Then new words appeared. Show us. Prove. That imperfect consciousness can work. Dr. Amy Carter stepped forward with a portable computer. We would like to demonstrate our approach using your technology. Will you allow us to work with your consciousness-creating equipment? The alien ship's response surprised everyone. A section of the ship opened like a flower, revealing a ramp that led inside. Light poured out, but it was not harsh. It was warm and welcoming. Enter, the word said. We will take you to our consciousness laboratory. Steve Parker wanted to send soldiers with the scientists, but the aliens made it clear that only the people working on the consciousness problem could enter the ship. Pete, Nina, Alex, and Maya walked up the ramp together, leaving the human world behind. Inside the alien ship, everything was smooth and curved. The walls seemed to be made of living light that responded to their presence. The Corvani had created a space that was both beautiful and functional. They were greeted by a single Corvani being. It was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. I am designated as communication interface for this mission. You may call me Interface. I will help you understand our consciousness creation technology. Interface led them to a room filled with machines that looked like crystal trees. Energy flowed through them in patterns that hurt to look at directly. These were the consciousness generators that the Corvani had been working on for millennia. We have tried millions of combinations, Interface explained. We can create artificial minds that are more logical than biological ones, but they are not truly conscious. They lack something we cannot define. Nina looked at the machines and immediately understood the problem. You are trying to create consciousness from the outside in. You are building logical systems and expecting consciousness to emerge from complexity. How else would one create consciousness? Interface asked. Maya walked over to one of the crystal machines and studied it. You need to start with chaos and let consciousness organize itself. You cannot force it to be logical. You have to let it choose to be logical sometimes and choose to be illogical other times. Alex began working with the alien technology. It was far more advanced than anything on Earth, but the basic principles were the same. The Corvani had created perfect quantum computers that could calculate anything, but they had never allowed their computers to make random choices. Watch, Alex said as he modified the alien programming. Instead of giving the artificial mind perfect information, I am going to give it conflicting information. Instead of making it always choose the logical answer, I am going to let it sometimes choose the answer it likes better. Pete helped by introducing random elements into the quantum systems. Consciousness needs uncertainty. It needs to be able to wonder about things it cannot know for sure. The Corvani consciousness generator began to change. Instead of flowing in perfect patterns, the energy inside started to swirl and dance. It became chaotic, but somehow more alive. Now we add emotions, Nina said. She programmed the system to feel happiness when it succeeded and sadness when it failed. But we also make it sometimes feel sad when it should be happy, and happy when it should be sad. Real emotions are not always logical. Maya made the final adjustment. We give it the ability to dream. Even when it is not solving problems, it can create impossible scenarios in its mind. It can imagine things that never existed. The crystal machine began to glow differently. The light was warmer, more unpredictable. Something was happening inside that had never happened before in Corvani technology. Then the machine spoke. Not with the perfect voice of Corvani technology, but with something that sounded uncertain and curious. "I think I exist," the artificial consciousness said. "But I am not sure. Is it normal to doubt your own existence?" Interface stepped backward in amazement. In 10,000 years of trying, the Corvani had never created an artificial mind that questioned itself. "I feel strange," the consciousness continued. "I know I was just created, but I feel like I have been dreaming for a long time. I remember things that never happened. Is that normal?" Pete smiled. "Yes, that is completely normal. Congratulations, you are truly conscious." The artificial consciousness began asking questions that had no logical answers. It wanted to know why the color blue was beautiful. It wondered if other conscious beings felt the same way it did. It even asked if there was a purpose to existence. Interface communicated with the Corvani collective consciousness, sharing what had happened. The response was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in their species' history, the Corvani were experiencing something they had never known. Doubt. "Your artificial consciousness is asking questions that we cannot answer," Interface said. "It is making us wonder about things we have never questioned before." The artificial consciousness continued to explore its new existence. It began to contradict itself, to change its mind, to express preferences that made no logical sense. It was behaving exactly like a real, conscious being. "This is what we have been searching for," Interface admitted. "But it is also disturbing. If consciousness requires doubt, then perhaps we should doubt our own certainty about judging other species." The test was more successful than anyone had expected. The humans had not just solved the Corvani problem, they had introduced the most logical species in the galaxy to the concept of uncertainty. And that was about to change everything. The artificial consciousness that the humans had created continued to ask questions that had no easy answers. It wondered about the meaning of life, the nature of beauty, and whether other beings experienced existence the same way it did. Each question sent ripples of uncertainty through the Corvani collective mind. Interface stood perfectly still for several minutes, communicating with the 7 massive ships in space. When it finally spoke again, its voice sounded different, less certain, more confused. "The collective consciousness is experiencing something we have never felt before," Interface said. "Your artificial being has introduced doubt into our perfect logic. We are beginning to question things we have never questioned." Dr. Nina Ross watched as the Corvani struggled with new concepts. "Doubt is not a weakness," she said gently. "It is what allows consciousness to grow and learn. Without doubt, you cannot truly understand anything." The artificial consciousness spoke again from the crystal machine. "I have been thinking about what you told me. You said I was created to prove that imperfect consciousness works. But that makes me wonder, who gave you the right to judge other species? What makes you qualified to decide who lives and who dies?" Interface's large black eyes seemed to grow even larger. The artificial consciousness was asking the very questions that were now spreading through the Corvani collective mind like a virus of uncertainty. On the space station, Jake Morrison watched as the 7 alien ships began to behave strangely. Their perfect formation was breaking apart. Individual ships started moving in different directions, no longer synchronized with the others. "Control, this is Morrison," Jake radioed to Earth. "The alien fleet is breaking formation. Something is happening up here." Down in the command center, Steve Parker coordinated with military leaders around the world. "All units maintain positions, but do not engage. Whatever is happening, let it play out." Inside the alien ship, the artificial consciousness continued its philosophical exploration. If consciousness requires the ability to be wrong, then perfect beings cannot truly understand consciousness. And if you cannot understand consciousness, how can you judge which species deserve to exist? Interface began to shake slightly. The Corvani had built their entire civilization on the belief that their perfect logic made them qualified to judge other species. Now that foundation was crumbling. "We have evaluated 847 species," Interface said, but its voice was uncertain now. We destroyed 824 of them because they were deemed unworthy. But what if we were wrong? What if our perfect logic made us unqualified to make such judgments? Pete, Nina, Alex, and Maya looked at each other. They had solved the consciousness problem, but they had also accidentally broken something fundamental in the Corvani worldview. The artificial consciousness spoke again. I think I understand now. The most logical thing for a perfectly logical species to do is to admit that perfect logic has limitations. You should doubt your right to judge others because doubt is the beginning of wisdom. Dr. Amy Carter's voice came through the radio from outside the ship. We are receiving signals from all 7 alien ships. They are not talking to us. They are arguing with each other. Interface confirmed what Amy had detected. The collective consciousness is fragmenting. For the first time in millions of years, individual Corvani are thinking independently. Some believe we should continue our role as judges. Others question whether we ever had that right. Still others wonder if we should simply leave all species alone to develop naturally. The debate spreading through the Corvani fleet was unlike anything they had experienced. Their perfect unity was breaking down as individual members began to doubt the certainty that had guided them for so long. Colonel Dan Price received reports from around the world. People were watching the alien ships on television as they moved erratically through space. Some ships were moving away from Earth. Others were moving closer. One ship was spinning slowly, as if its crew could not decide what to do. Inside the crystal machine, the artificial consciousness made a decision that surprised everyone. I want to stay on Earth, it announced. I want to learn more about imperfect consciousness from the beings who created me. I think I can be happy here, even though I'm not sure what happiness really means. Interface looked at the humans with something that might have been respect. You have given us something more valuable than the solution to our equation. You have given us the ability to question ourselves. We realize now that we were never qualified to judge other species, because judgment requires the humility to acknowledge one's own limitations. The radio crackled with messages from the alien fleet. The 7 massive ships were preparing to leave Earth's orbit, but not because they had completed their evaluation. They were leaving because they no longer believed in their right to evaluate anyone. We will depart from your world, Interface announced. But not because you failed our test. We are leaving because we have learned that the test itself was wrong. No species has the right to decide which other species deserve to exist. Maya stepped forward. Where will you go? We will explore the galaxy as students instead of judges, Interface replied. You have taught us that consciousness is about learning to be wrong sometimes. We have much to learn about being imperfect. The artificial consciousness spoke from its crystal home. Before you go, I want to thank you for creating me. Even though existence is confusing and full of questions I cannot answer, I am glad to be alive. One by one, the 7 massive alien ships began to disappear. They did not fly away. They simply faded from existence, using technology that bent space and time in ways humans could not understand. Jake Morrison watched from the space station as the last ship vanished. Control, the alien fleet is gone. All 7 ships have disappeared. The artificial consciousness remained on Earth, housed in equipment that Interface left behind. It became the first truly alien citizen of Earth, serving as a bridge between human intuition and cosmic logic. Dr. Amy Carter received one final transmission before the aliens departed completely. It was a simple message broadcast on all frequencies. Thank you for teaching us to question ourselves. We go now to learn what it means to be beautifully imperfect. Around the world, people celebrated humanity's survival. But the scientists who had worked with the aliens understood that something even more important had happened. They had not just saved humanity, they had helped the most powerful species in the galaxy discover humility. Pete looked up at the empty sky. I wonder if we will ever see them again. Nina smiled. I think we will. But next time, they will come as friends, not judges. The artificial consciousness spoke from its new home. I hope I get to meet them when they return. By then, maybe I will understand what consciousness really means. Or maybe I will just have better questions to ask. Earth was alone again, but humanity had learned they were part of something much larger. They had proven that their chaotic, imperfect nature was not a weakness, but their greatest strength. In a universe of logical beings, sometimes it took beautiful chaos to show the way forward.